Well, morning. How are y'all? Thanks for coming. I appreciate y'all being here. This will be one thoroughly recorded session between Freund and Edelman and the fellow with the camera. I believe this is about at 20 minutes, so we'll have some time for questions, comments, objections, denials. It will be from the middle of the title story of my upcoming Small Beer Press collection, which is titled An Agent of Utopia. So I have to set it up a little. The title character is an emissary from that fabled land, sent to the Tower of London to rescue Thomas More from the headsman's axe. But More, who is set on martyrdom, refuses to go, and the agent instead falls under the sway of More's daughter, Margaret, or Meg, who gives the utopian a different assignment: retrieve her father's head from its pike atop London Bridge. So this is the mission already in progress. Experimenting with plot and all, Okay. In mid-climb, my feet against the outer wall of the gateway, I clutched the rope, straining to hear what was happening on the battlement above. Had my hook been noticed? Apparently not. I heard a murmuring conversation among guards, perhaps 3 men, but they were distant. I pulled myself up to the edge of the wall. More than once in my slow progress upward, one window level at the time, I had been tempted to let that damned not Morehead that weighted my shoulder sack and became only heavier each minute simply drop into the Thames. But no, a substitute head would be useful. With luck, no one would notice that More was missing. I waited there just beneath the battlement for the guards to go below. Possibly they would not, in which case I would have to kill them all quickly and silently. I determined to give them a quarter hour and began to mark my heartbeats as I looked out over the nightscape of the city. But soon all 3 voices moved into the stairwell, and I clambered up and over. I counted my way to the Moor Pike, hoping the heads had not been rearranged since sunset. I easily lifted the heavy pole out of its socket and stepped backward, laying it onto the flagstones as silently as I could. The head end necessarily was heavier and hit first, bouncing once. I walked up the length of the pipe. I reached beneath the iron band, grimacing as my fingers dented the head's tarred surface, and tugged. The head did not budge. I put both feet against the severed neck, braced myself, and pushed. The flesh buckled. I pushed again, and the head slowly began to stutter up the pipe. I was thus occupied when I heard voices ascending the stairs. Frantically, I managed to slide the head clear of the pipe just as the first guard crested the roof, facing southward and away from me, thank Mithras. I let the pipe down quietly and rolled sideways, putting a low wall between myself and the guards. I hoped they were not in the habit of counting the pipes. I flung a pebble into the far corner of the rooftop, hoping it would make a noise loud enough to draw their attention. I suppose it landed. If so, it made not a sound. One guard began walking the battlement toward me. His attention was directed outward. Sitting with my back to the inner wall, willing myself to disappear into the shadow, I watched him stroll into view. He stopped, still with his back to me, and stared downstream. A few steps, and he would all but trip over the pipe and over Moore's head. I risked a glance behind me. One guard was picking his teeth, another leaning on his elbows, both looking across southward. I stood and crossed silently to my guard, swinging the bag with the not More head. It clouted the guard at the base of the skull, As he dropped, I kicked him between the shoulder blades and he toppled over the wall. I dived for cover again. Only someone who was listening for it would have noticed the splash far below. The two remaining guards continued their murmurous conversation on the far side of the platform. I rolled into a crouch, looked over the crenellated wall that sheltered the stairs. My new friends were standing just barely within the torchlight of a taper on the far wall. They stood side by side facing the city, overlooking the rooftops that lined the bridge below. I wished them to separate, willed them to do so, but my will failed. There they would stand, barely a man's width between them, until they registered their companion had not rejoined them, whereupon they would seek, and not finding, sound an alarm. How to separate them sooner? "Water!" moaned a voice at my feet. You scarce will believe, ye who read this letter, that I did not spring backward, though my leg muscles spasmed in that impulse. My overriding desire to produce no noise whatsoever saved me, I think. I only hopped once, silently landing in place with my feet planted a bit farther apart, to either side of the lump of darkness I knew to be Moore's head. I did not cry out, I did not breathe, I only stared down between my feet, desperate to resolve a shape that began to move, to rock to and fro, like an inverted turtle, until it tipped and rolled to a stop against my left boot, its staring eyes reflecting the moon, as its only movable limb, its long adder-like tongue, probed the air. Of course, I thought with insane clarity, that's how he could roll over. Face down, he had pushed away the stone floor with his tongue. "Water," Moore repeated more loudly. The guards, they would hear. With no more thought than this, nay, no thought at all, still on the keen iron edge of terror and preferring to be anywhere but against that Morehead, I stood and strode forward, fast, noiseless, toward the two guards who yet had heard nothing, still had their backs to me. In mid-stride, slacking neither pace nor direction, I turned my back to them, walked backward until their faces came into view, and my shoulder blades thumped against the wall between them. "What?" said one. I smashed the heels of both hands into the guards' noses. As they fell backward, I fell forward atop them, rode them down to the floor, and crushed their faces with all my weight, my arms locked in place like bars. Out of respect, I did not watch. I looked to the stars, found Ophiuchus beset, the writhing serpent head and serpent tail to either side, and the scorpion beneath his feet. The guards made scarcely any noise, only a grunt or two and one gurgle, as a gentlewoman's stomach might have done. And yet after they died, as I relaxed and flexed my cramping arms, the tower was quieter still. I saw the guttering taper, the flailing flags, but their sounds did not register. As I recrossed the platform in search of Moore, his eyes, his tongue, I moved in a silence like that of a dream or of a daze from a clout on the head. I heard only the blood and the snot and the eye stuff pattering from my hands, which I held away from my body, as if to distance myself from what I had done. I had killed before, and indeed likely killed the first guard not 5 minutes earlier, and I have killed since. But my work atop Stone Gate that night, as I left that accursed tower, was of another order. I blamed Moore at the time. Whatever animated his head, I felt, was animating me, and my body would ache for a fortnight. I rounded the wall, and Moore's head was gone. No, it was there, nose wedged into the joint of wall and floor, but surely I had left it over there beside the pipe. "Water," said Moore's head. "Hush," I said. When would the next guards come on duty? When would the absence of tramping footfalls overhead be noticed? What signals, what duties would be missed? I worked quickly. Ignoring Moore, I freed not Moore from his sack with some effort. I had to shake it, my assault on the first guard having got head and fabric intermingled. And it finally rolled onto the floor with a deep groan that made me yelp in horror, but 'twas only Moore again, complaining. I jammed the pike into Not Moore's neck, working it in deeper than necessary, wishing it were more. I hoisted the pike with effort and set the hilt into place with the first relief I had felt in an hour. I stepped back, snatched up the taper, and held it high to check my handiwork. As he flickered into view, Not More sagged sideways, and I was sure for a moment that its savaged flesh would tear away and drop into the Thames, but it held. And I foolishly continued to hold aloft the light in a terrible elation until a voice from below cried, "Oh, what's the matter up there? Who's mine?" "No matter," I cried, even as I returned the taper to its sconce. Too late. I heard behind me from the outer wall a scrape like nails against flint. "What's this?" said the same voice, half to himself, in a sort of wonder. I looked at my grappling hook as it twitched, flexed, skittered sideways like a crab. He who had yanked it bellowed, "Intruder! Ho! The tower! Hoy!" I snatched up Moore. He tried to bite me, the wretch, as I shoved him into my sack. To fling the hook over the wall was the work of a moment. With my snarling burden, I strode away from my ruined lifeline to the head of the wooden stairs, saw no one, and sprinted down 3 planks at a time. I found myself in a narrow stone chamber, barely wider than the flight of stairs. I faced a stone archway that framed a landing and a more substantial set of stone steps headed down. I had just reached the top when I heard a roaring and pounding from below, and torchlight flared and brightened against the stone wall visible at the curve. I dropped my Moore sack, he squeaked as he hit the floor, and looked about. Above in the open air I would gain room to work, but so would they. Here was better. I stepped back 3 paces, positioned myself, and waited as that fell force rode within me. The leader of the party gained the stone landing, but stopped at sight of me. I stood unarmed, hands and feet besmirched with gore, a twitching sack at my feet. I know that I smiled, but what more did he see? Whatever it was, it stopped him like a barred gate, and the others clustered behind, 5 total. 1 axe, 3 swords, the 5th, a torch in one hand and a rapier in the other. Fine. "Which of you," I asked, "is the youngest?" 2 in the back glanced at the torchbearer, a beardless boy. They all looked wary, but he terrified. Their leader looked me up and down. "Who the fuck are you?" he snarled, "to question us?" "I'm the rat catcher," I said, and sprang. Afterward, I rose from my work on the floor and faced the one I'd left standing. The boy's quaking face was red with blood not his own. His shaking torch cast shadows that rocked the room. He choked back something and dropped his weapon with a clang. He kept the torch, though. He was a dark-eyed, lovely boy. I have never been partial to boys. "Your job," I said, "is to run below and tell the others." His jaw worked. His throat pulsed. He made no sound. "That I am coming," I said. Still he stood, trembling. The room filled with a smell harsher even than blood, and a puddle spread at the boy's boot. "Christ!" cried Moore, muffled by sacking. "Christ!" I took 1 step toward the boy, pursed my lips, and blew into his face. With a wail, he leapt into the stairwell, somehow kept his footing, and ran downstairs, screaming just ahead of me. Still, he held on to the torch. Oh, dutiful boy, excellent boy. More clamped beneath one arm, my way lighted by the now much older once boy. I ran in a stone spiral, around and down, past windows of increasing size, around and down, deeper into the swirling river stitch, until I reached a window just my size and vaulted through, knowing not whether I was over roofs or over water, but hoping I was low enough. I was over water and low enough. I plunged beneath the surface and sank, afire with sudden cold, but glad of the respite from the smell. As I dropped ever deeper, my cheek was brushed by perhaps a kicking rat, my shoulder bumped by perhaps a bobbing turd, my chest gnawed by the struggling head of my lady's father, biting at my heart as we descended into the dark peace below London. I low enough. I dared not return to my inn in my bedraggled state with my unpredictable charge. Instead, I repaired to a haven I had noted earlier, a nearby Playhouse marked by a bundle of straw on a pole extending from an upper window and a foot-high cross slapped on the door in red paint. None would dare set foot in the place. I made fast the shutters, risked a single lighted candle, and gnawed the bread, cheese, and onion I had stowed there before my assault on the gateway, and then somehow I slept. I was awakened by Moore. "Where is the light?" "Be silent," I said. "The candle is beside you. Look." I pulled the wretched thing from the sack, set it on the table. His neck looked to have been cut clean, but at an angle. The head listed to the right, as if cocked to hear a confidence. The skin puckered on that side beneath Moore's weight. "Where is the light? Ah, am I damned? Am I such a sinner as that?" He spoke, though his lips were closed. "I cannot say," I told him, "but you must be quiet in any case." "God knows I am no heretic," said Moore. "I sought out heretics. I had them killed. They put God's word in the English tongue in the mouths of fishwives. They rejected the apostle of Rome. They were Protestants to God. I was Lord High Chancellor, but I served the Lord who was higher still. They were as bad as Luther. And Luther is the shit pool of all shit." "Were they beheaded too?" I asked. "No, burned," said the head, "purified in the flames and delivered shriven unto God. It was all I could do for them, poor misguided devils. I hope soon to clasp their hands, my prodigal brothers. And yet," "Yes," I asked, "where is the light?" I turned my head to face the candle, my fingers sinking into his temple as into a soft pear. This made the lace across the table twist into a gyre. It was intimate with Moore's neck now. Moore moaned, "Where is the light? Oh, Christ my Savior, what is this place?" "I believe it's an apothecary's," I said. "But where?" "London," I said, "mere rods from the stone gate. You've not gone far." "Oh, Christ, I smell it, the Thames." "You'll not smell it long. I'll deliver you to your daughter." "My daughter? Where is she? What business have you with Meg?" "She tasked me with an errand," I said, "with the delivery of your head." He emitted a wail. "Oh, you wretch, you cullion, you ass-spreading Ingle, you are a worse shit even than Luther. Meg wanted only my head, but you, pestiferous, stew-dwelling, punk-eating monkworm, you have stolen my soul." "Hush, man! I have only your head. I know naught of your soul." He wailed the louder. I seized his screaming skull two-handed, wrenched at the jaw until I tore it open. I snatched up an onion, wedged it in. The wailing continued. I seized the candlestick and smashed the head with the base, mashing a savage dent as the flame toppled into my wine and went out, leaving me in the dark with this howling dead thing. Shut up! For Meg's sake, shut up! Meg, it said. Meg! And said no more. I'll stop. The story I love ending with "and said no more." Now I proceed to say more and spoil the effect. But the story I always have to tell when I read this bit is a window into our marriage of Sydney and me, because I work in the basement office, and when she is up on the ground floor, and she never knows what I'm working on. She has next to no idea, not only what page, but what project I'm working on. But in the middle of it, I sometimes emerge with my hair askew and a wild look in my eyes. And this time I was completely stuck, and I raced upstairs and barged into the living room, and I said, "There is a screaming severed head on the table, and I can't shut it up, and it is the 16th century. What would you do?" And I don't recall her even looking up from the newspaper or whatever she was reading. She just said, "I would hit it with a candlestick and stuff an onion in its mouth." And I said, "Okay, thank you." And I went downstairs. And so that is in the... And I read this at ICFA in March. And afterward, a day or so afterwards, somebody came up to me in the crowd and said, "You realize Thomas More is a saint?" I said, "Oh, yeah. In fact, I knew that." Anyway, thoughts, comments, questions?
A tongue for all seasons.
Oh dear.
I can't wait to find out why Mithras.
Mithras gets invoked somewhere in More's book. More's complicated, problematic, interesting thing. But I'm sure all the More historians and More scholars and utopian studies folks will descend on me, and that's all right, as long as they spell my name right. Sydney was a big help, and the Sycamore Hill Writers Workshop was a big help with this story. Sarah was present for that. I'm glad you were here for the candlestick. So this is going to be the title story, An Agent of Utopia, New and Selected Stories. And there's two new novelettes, this being one, and the other is titled Real Indians, and it's about a Mohawk steel worker in the 1920s in Manhattan, and the premiere of the Flaming Frontier, the Custer movie, and how they wind up colliding. And it's also a ghost story, of course, because all this goes together somehow.
When is the book out?
It's going to be in production this fall at Small Beer, so I'm hoping 2018.
Do you picture Moore's face like the Holbein portrait or the actor in Wolf Hall?
I picture him like the actor in Wolf Hall. Actually, I was so glad. And what is his name? Anton
Lesser.
Anton Lesser. He's one of the. He was I think in Hugh Bonneville's class at the RSC or whatever, and has been playing character roles ever since. But he's one of my current faves. He's the evil maester that helps Cersei in Game of Thrones, and he's Endeavor's problematic boss at the constabulary in Oxford. Yeah, on that series, he's great. So
Maybe
I just,
you'll play him in the movie of the story.
well, here's hoping. Yeah, some BBC coin. So, but yeah, y'all took it better than the ICFA, because like half the people were just like howling with laughter, and then the other half of the people were like, you know, the audience in Mel Brooks is the producer, their faces. So that's all right. Keep people shaken up. Other thoughts?
I love the richness of the English tongue, and your imaginative, or Moore's imaginative cursing.
Of course, a lively discussion broke out at Sick Hill over the extent to which this is more. To which that is, I'll leave it at that. But,
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I love the, whenever I'm, and the linguists will be after me too, I'm sure, but whenever I'm writing anything, the language is an entry point into it, and I develop all these glossaries for myself of, you know, how would they curse each other, you know. And often they would curse each other the same way we do, but it's a lot more fun to like just trail together all these things. Oh, and the part about Luther being the shit pool of all shit, that's a direct quote from one of Moore's anti-Luther tracts that he wrote either under a pseudonym or anonymously, because it was high times in Reformation England, and all these broadsides were going back and forth, and so yeah, so saint to a point, like all of us, right? You know, problematic.
Are there other well-known contemporaries of the era in the book?
In the story? Well, Meg herself, who is fascinating, who is she's not in this scene, but she is a major player in the story. She fascinates me. This highly educated woman whose society allowed her like no place to use her education, you know. So she was something.
What became of her? What became of her?
That's a good question. I'm blanking right now. I think she lived what was at the time a normal span. She did wind up with her father's head, and there is some discussion about how she did that. Obviously, she must have just bribed somebody or knew somebody, but it's more fun to imagine, you know, all this sort of thing.
No, it's interesting because, you know, in A Room of One's Own, Virginia Woolf writes about the tragedy of Shakespeare's martyr sister.
That's right, yes. And she, Meg was certainly another of those. But at the time, she was like renowned for being accomplished. She did some translations and some writing of her own. But now, of course, she is remembered mainly as, you know, a supporting player, the devoted, grieving daughter in the Moore saga, the Moore passion play. You know, she was Susanna York in A Man for All Seasons, right?
Did she marry Roper?
Pardon?
Did she marry Roper?
Oh, yes, they were already married at the time. He was a dutiful son-in-law. In my story, he's a bit of a schmuck, but it's all right, because all my interest is in Meg, and in the Utopian agent. Because if you read Utopia and you really think about it, I mean, on every level it is ironic. It is irony upon irony. Sydney and I love the meme that's going around online with the portraits of Moore and Erasmus having a comic strip discussion with the balloons. And Moore says, you know, what level of irony are you on? And Erasmus said, I'm on level 7. And then Moore says, you are like a little baby. Because like everything in Utopia is irony on top of irony. But among other things, the Utopian culture is rather savage. You know, they are opposed to war, but when it's necessary, they hire mercenaries to do it, because they can't be bothered themselves, but let other people kill themselves. And they're okay with slavery because people petition to become slaves in Utopia, because it's so much better to be a slave there than free anywhere else. And they also believe in targeted assassinations. So in grad school, when I read Utopia, I got to thinking, you know, they would have some really bad actors, you know, in their employ. It would be like a, you know, a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie or something. You know, the utopians. You know, that was the nugget of the story.
Well, that's all part of the package, because I think, you know, Moore may be a saint, but I think it's good work for you to point out, as you do, even in passing, that Moore was as much of an inquisitor as any of the rest of them.
Yeah.
You know, he was not, he was a you know, defended the faith by slaughtering people.
There were some casualties, but I will say, in fairness, that was a terribly politically fraught and dangerous time. And how are we handling our own terribly politically fraught and dangerous time? What choices are we making that history will look back on and wonder, what was up with them? You know, how did they make these careful parsing decisions? You know, I will persecute the Lord's enemies, but at a certain point I will say, you know, no, I will not compromise my conscience. I have only sympathy with history.
Bring me the head of Jeffrey Board Art Session.
There's a lot of severed head fun in this, as you can see. Thank you. Dr. Grimwood from my thesis committee many years ago referred to Andy's Tales of the Macabre. And I think this is definitely one of them. Thank you all for coming. Very much.